You beat the game, you thought you understood it, then you played it again and realized you missed everything that mattered. Some games you finish and move on. These 19, they don't let you move on, they pull you back in. The second time hits way harder than the first, not because the game changed, because you did. Alright, here are 19 PlayStation games that hit harder the second time. Inside is a puzzle platformer that you finish in 3 hours. Then you immediately restart it because you need to see it again with different eyes. The first time, you're just trying to survive, running right, solving environmental puzzles, avoiding guards and creatures. The atmosphere is oppressive, but you're too focused on not dying to really absorb what's happening around you. The second time, you start noticing the background, the experiments, the other children. The way the environment tells a story the gameplay distracts you from. Every area you rush through the first time becomes a scene worth studying. The ending makes you replay it, not because you didn't understand, because understanding it makes you want to see how the game was showing you the truth the entire time. Details you thought were just creepy art direction become deliberate storytelling. What makes us hit harder is how compact it is. 3 hours means replaying doesn't feel like a commitment, but those 3 hours feel completely different when you know where it's going. Hellblade is about a warrior dealing with psychosis navigating Norse mythology. The second playthrough is about recognizing the difference between what's real and what isn't. First time, the voices in Senwa's head are just atmosphere. Disturbing, but part of the experience. You're focused on combat, on puzzles, on pushing forward through a journey you don't fully understand yet. Second time, you know which voices are helping, which are lying, which represent parts of Senwa she's fighting against. The audio design that felt overwhelming becomes a narrative tool you can actually parse. You start noticing when the voices contradict each other, when they're protecting her, when they're destroying her. The rot mechanic feels different too. First time, it's just a threat. Second time, you understand what it actually represents and why the game uses it the way it does. What makes this hit harder is how the mental health representation becomes clearer. First playthrough is immersion. Second is understanding. You're not just experiencing psychosis through a character, you're seeing how the game structures itself around it. What Remains of Edith Finch is a 2-hour walking sim about a cursed family. The second time, you realize the curse was always a choice. First playthrough, you're absorbing the tragedy. Each family member's death is presented as inevitable, fantastical. The game's structure makes you believe the Finch family curse is real. You're too busy experiencing each vignette to question the framing. Second playthrough, you notice the details, how the family talks about the curse, how they lean into it, how the curse becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they expect tragedy. The fantastical elements in each death sequence aren't what actually happened, they're how the family remembers it. The Gregory sequence hits different, the Lewis sequence becomes more heartbreaking. The final revelation about Edith's mother recontextualizes the entire structure of the game. What makes this hit harder is how short it is. You can replay the entire thing in an evening, and doing so reveals a completely different story hiding underneath the surface narrative. It's a game about family mythology and how tragedy becomes identity. Bloodborne is a nightmare you barely survive the first time. The second time, you're hunting through it with purpose. First playthrough is pure panic. Every enemy is a threat. Every area is claustrophobic terror. You're dying constantly, learning movesets, memorizing enemy placements. The lore is incomprehensible. You're too busy trying not to die to read item descriptions or understand what Yharnam actually is. Second playthrough, you understand the combat. Parry windows are instinct now. Rally mechanics are second nature. What felt impossible the first time becomes manageable. You're not reacting anymore, you're planning. Bosses that took 20 attempts go down in 2. The lore clicks into place. You know the Great Ones are important. You know the Healing Church caused this. You recognize foreshadowing in early areas. Enemies you thought were random are thematically connected. The nightmare isn't chaos, it's structured cosmic horror. What makes this hit harder is how transformation feels. First time, you're scared. Second time, you're confident. The game that brutalizes you becomes a playground, and understanding the lore makes Yharnam feel tragic instead of just hostile. Journey is a 2-hour experience about connection. The second time is about noticing the other player. First playthrough, you're mesmerized by the visuals, the music, the way the game flows from area to area without loading screens or UI. You're focused on reaching the mountain, on collecting scarf upgrades, on surviving the descent. Second time, you pay attention to your companion, how they communicate through musical chimes, how they help you fly, how they wait for you if you fall behind. You realize the game is designed around cooperation without words. Every mechanic exists to make two strangers work together naturally. The ending reframes everything. You see their name. You realize you just spent 2 hours with a real person and never spoke. The entire journey becomes a shared memory with someone you'll probably never meet again. What makes this hit harder is understanding the metaphor. First time it's beautiful. Second time it's about companionship and mortality. The game tells a story about life without a single word, and knowing that makes the silence meaningful instead of just pretty. Shadow of the Colossus is an epic quest the first time. The second time, it's a tragedy you're complicit in. First playthrough, you're focused on the Colossi, these massive creatures wandering a forbidden land. The fights are puzzles. You're climbing bodies, finding weak points, bringing down giants. It feels heroic. The music swells, the camera frames each kill like an achievement. Second playthrough, you notice their behavior. They're not aggressive. Most don't attack until you hurt them. They're just existing in this world, defending themselves. The game never says they're evil. You assume they were because games train you to think big monsters are enemies. The price you're paying becomes obvious. Every Colossus you kill makes Wander look worse, the darkness spreading through him, the way his appearance degrades. The ending stops being a surprise and starts being the inevitable conclusion. What makes this hit harder is recognizing the game was judging you the whole time. First playthrough, you think you're the hero. Second playthrough, you understand you're the villain, and the Colossi were innocent. 13 Sentinels is a time travel mystery that makes zero sense the first time. The second time, you realize it was always making perfect sense. First playthrough, you're juggling 13 different perspectives across different time periods. Nothing connects. You're following individual stories without seeing the larger picture. Plot threads seem random. You're trusting the game has a plan. Second playthrough, everything clicks. You know how the timelines connect. You recognize foreshadowing. Lines of dialogue that seemed throwaway are actually critical reveals. Characters mentioning things you thought were flavor text are describing plot points you already know happen. The time travel logic that felt confusing becomes airtight. The romance arcs hit harder because you know which couples actually make it. The sacrifices characters make land with full weight because you understand what they're preventing. What makes this hit harder is how the structure rewards attention. First time, you're piecing together a puzzle. Second time, you're admiring how well the puzzle was designed. It's one of the tightest narratives in gaming, and you only appreciate that craft on replay. The Stanley Parable is about choices that don't matter. The second time is about realizing they never mattered, and that's the point. First playthrough, you're testing boundaries, following the narrator, defying the narrator, finding secret endings. The game feels like it's reacting to you, like your choices are meaningful. Second playthrough, you realize the narrator already planned for everything. Every act of rebellion was scripted. Every hidden path was designed. The game isn't giving you freedom. It's giving you the illusion of freedom and then showing you the strings. The Ultra Deluxe content adds layers to this. New endings comment on the original game. The skip button becomes existential horror. What felt like clever meta-commentary the first time becomes genuinely unsettling the second time because you understand the implications. What makes this hit harder is how it deconstructs player agency. First time, it's funny. Second time, it's uncomfortable. You're laughing less and thinking more about how game design manipulates you and whether any choice in any game actually matters. Inscription is a card game that becomes 3 different games that become an ARG. The second time, you catch everything you missed. First playthrough, you're learning the card mechanics, building decks, trying to beat the dealer in the cabin. When the game shifts genres, it's shocking. When it shifts again, it's disorienting. You're reacting to twists instead of understanding them. Second playthrough, you notice the hints. The game tells you what's coming if you pay attention. Easter eggs hidden in card descriptions, environmental details in the cabin, the way mechanics from Act 1 prepare you for Act 3. The meta-narrative makes sense. First time, you're confused about what the game is. Second time, you understand it's a story about game preservation, about cursed media, about obsession with lost games. Every strange choice has thematic purpose. What makes this hit harder is how dense it is. First playthrough is about surviving the ride. Second is about appreciating the craft. It's a game about games that only reveals itself fully when you know where it's going. Quick question, which game on this list made you replay it the fastest? Drop it in the comments. Alright, let's keep going. Outer Wilds is a space mystery that you can only truly experience once. The second time is about watching someone else discover it. First playthrough is pure exploration. You're learning the solar system, finding clues, piecing together what happened to the Nomai. Every discovery is a revelation. Every connection you make feels earned. The time loop creates urgency, but also freedom to experiment. Second playthrough, you already know the solution. You can't unlearn the puzzle, so the value shifts. You notice details you rush past, environmental storytelling you missed, the way every location tells part of a larger story, how the game subtly guides you without ever holding your hand. Watching someone else play becomes the real second playthrough. Seeing them make connections, explore areas in different orders, experience revelations you already had. It becomes about sharing the discovery instead of experiencing it. What makes this hit harder is how knowledge changes everything. First time is wonder. Second time is appreciation for design. You can't recapture the initial magic, but you gain respect for how perfectly constructed the whole experience is. Soma is sci-fi horror that becomes existential philosophy. The second time, you're not scared, you're thinking. First playthrough, you're surviving underwater facilities, avoiding monsters, following Catherine, trying to escape. The atmosphere is oppressive, the body horror is disturbing. You're too stressed to fully process what the game is actually asking you. Second playthrough, the monster encounters matter less. You know where they are, you know how to avoid them. What matters is the conversations, the questions about consciousness, about what makes you, you, about whether copying a mind creates a person or kills one. The choices hit different. First time, you make decisions based on survival instinct. Second time, you're making philosophical arguments with yourself. The coin flip at the end stops being about hope and starts being about the cruelty of subjective experience. What makes this hit harder is how the horror becomes secondary. First playthrough is about fear. Second is about implications. You're not running from monsters. You're sitting with uncomfortable questions about identity and continuity, and the game doesn't give you comfortable answers. Heavy Rain is a crime thriller with massive branching paths. The second time is about seeing how much you missed. First playthrough, you're trying to save Sean, making choices under pressure, following one path through a dense network of possibilities. Characters can die. The story continues without them. You see one version of the narrative. Second playthrough, you realize how different it could have been. Entire chapters you never saw. Character arcs that played out completely differently. Revelations that happened in alternate timelines. The game has depth you couldn't access in a single run. The twist works better on replay. First time, it's shocking. Second time, you catch the misdirection, how the game cheats slightly to preserve the surprise, how it structures scenes to hide information while technically not lying. What makes this hit harder is recognizing the craft. First playthrough is about your story. Second is about all the stories you didn't see. The branches aren't just cosmetic, they're fundamentally different experiences, and you need multiple runs to understand how ambitious the structure actually is. BioShock Infinity is a shooter with a confusing ending. The second time, the entire game is foreshadowing. First playthrough, you're fighting through Columbia, using vigors, writing skylines, bonding with Elizabeth. The story seems like political commentary wrapped in action. The ending is a mind bend that requires wiki diving to understand. Second playthrough, you notice everything. Every barbershop quartet song is from the future. Every voxophone contains hints. Lutece Twins' dialogue is loaded with meaning you missed. The game tells you exactly what's happening if you're paying attention. Elizabeth's powers make sense. The nosebleeds aren't random. The way constant and variables work becomes clear. You understand why certain scenes repeat across timelines, why Booker makes the choices he makes, why the ending is mathematically inevitable. What makes this hit harder is how well hidden it is. First time, you're too distracted by combat and spectacle. Second time, the combat becomes background noise while you hunt for details. It's not just a twist ending, it's a game constructed around inevitability. BioShock is a shooter about free will. The second time, you realize you never had any. First playthrough, you're exploring Rapture, fighting splicers, harvesting or rescuing little sisters. The "would you kindly" twist is shocking. You thought you were making choices, you were following commands. Second playthrough, you catch it everywhere. Atlas's phrasing, the way the game railroads you while pretending it doesn't, how the linear path masquerades as exploration. "Would you kindly" is hidden in plain sight throughout the entire game. The Fontaine boss fight takes on new meaning. First time, it's just a final boss. Second time, it's thematic. You're fighting against control, breaking free from programming. The game that spent hours proving you have no agency gives you agency in the final moment. What makes this hit harder is how the medium gets weaponized. First time, the twist is about the story. Second time, it's about game design itself. Every game tells you what to do. BioShock just admits it and makes you complicit in your own manipulation. Disco Elysium is a detective game where the real case is yourself. The second time, you build a completely different detective. First playthrough, you're investigating a murder, solving a case, navigating politics. Your skills talk to you. You make choices based on your build. You see one version of the story filtered through your character's brain. Second playthrough, you spec completely differently. Intelligence build plays nothing like Psyche build. Different skills unlock different dialogue. Different failures create different moments. The game reacts to who you made your detective, not just mechanically, thematically. The political conversations change based on their ideology. The outcome of the case can shift. Characters respond to you differently. Kim's opinion of you varies wildly. What felt like one story reveals itself as dozens of stories wearing the same clothes. What makes this hit harder is how reactive it is. First time, you think you saw everything. Second time, you realize you saw maybe 30%. The density is absurd. The writing rewards multiple playthroughs by giving you genuinely different content, not just different endings, different experiences. NieR Automata is 5 games in one. The second time, you understand it was always about grief. First playthrough is Route A. You're 2B fighting machines in a post-apocalyptic Earth. The combat is tight, the music is incredible. The story seems straightforward. Androids versus machines. Humanity is extinct, but fighting continues. Route B is the same story from 9's perspective. You see what you missed. The machines aren't mindless. They're developing culture, religion, fear. Everything changes. What felt like a simple war story becomes philosophical. Routes C through E are the real game. First time, they're devastating. Second time, they're inevitable. You know what's coming. You know the cost. You watch characters make doomed choices and you can't stop them because this is how the story works. What makes this hit harder is understanding the structure. First playthrough, you're experiencing tragedy. Second playthrough, you're understanding why Yoko Taro built it this way. The repetition is thematic. The multiple routes aren't padding. They're the point. You need to see the story from every angle to understand what it's actually saying about meaning and loss. Alright, before we hit the top 3, which game completely changed your opinion on the second playthrough? Let me know in the comments. Let's finish this. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is a samurai game about honor versus survival. The second time is about mastering the combat you barely understood. First playthrough, you're learning stances, dodging, parrying, using ghost weapons when overwhelmed. The game is beautiful, but combat feels reactive. You're responding to threats, switching stances based on enemy type, surviving duels through pattern recognition. Second playthrough, you understand the flow. Perfect parries become consistent. You're not just switching stances, you're mixing them mid-combo. Ghost weapons stop being panic buttons and start being tactical tools. Duels transform from tense standoffs to performances. Lethal difficulty changes everything. Enemies kill you in 2 hits, but you kill them just as fast. Combat becomes about confidence and precision. The game that felt action-heavy becomes almost rhythmic. You're dancing through encounters that terrified you the first time. What makes this hit harder is how the skill ceiling reveals itself. First playthrough, you think you're good. Second playthrough, you realize you were barely competent. The combat system has depth you couldn't access until you mastered the basics, and mastery makes the game feel completely different. God of War is a father-son journey. The second time is about noticing Kratos barely holding it together. First playthrough, you're learning combat, fighting Norse gods, solving environmental puzzles. The story's compelling, but you're focused on gameplay, on progression, on beating the next boss. Second playthrough, you notice Kratos' body language, how he hesitates before telling Atreus things, how his voice changes when talking about the past, how he's constantly fighting his nature to be better for his son. The entire game is a man trying not to become the monster he was. Atreus' behavior makes more sense. His anger, his questions, his need for validation. You know what he doesn't know. You know what Kratos is protecting him from. Every conversation carries weight you couldn't feel the first time. The ending hits differently. First time, it's a reveal. Second time, it's the inevitable conclusion to everything the game was building. You see how carefully the story was constructed, how every piece mattered. What makes this hit harder is how restrained the storytelling is. First time, you're caught up in spectacle. Second time, you notice the quiet moments, the pauses, the things Kratos doesn't say. It's a game about a father trying to break a cycle, and you only appreciate that on replay. Red Dead Redemption 2 is about a gang falling apart. The second time is about watching everyone miss every chance they had to survive. First playthrough, you're living through the collapse, doing missions, bonding with camp members, following Dutch into increasingly desperate decisions. The story unfolds naturally. You're reacting to events as Arthur experiences them. Second playthrough, you see it all coming. You know who's loyal, who's a rat, who's gonna die. Dutch's speeches that sounded inspiring the first time sound like manipulation. Micah's behavior that seemed like personality is clearly poison. Every plan that fails was obviously doomed. Arthur's arc becomes more painful. First time, you discover his illness with him. Second time, you watch him ignore symptoms. You see him making peace with death while everyone around him keeps fighting. His journal entries take on new meaning. His conversations with Sister Calderon hit harder. The entire game becomes a tragedy you can't prevent. You're watching characters march toward disaster, making choices you know are wrong. Dutch's descent isn't shocking anymore, it's inevitable. The ending isn't surprising, it's just sad. What makes this the #1 game that hits harder is how long it is. You spend 60 hours with these people knowing how it ends. Every campfire conversation is tinged with loss. Every moment of happiness is borrowed time. First playthrough is about the journey. Second playthrough is about mourning people who were already dead. And that's 19. Some hit harder because you understand the mechanics. Some because you finally see what the story was really saying. All of them prove that great games don't reveal everything the first time through. Which game on this list changed the most for you on the second playthrough? Drop a comment. I want to know which one made you realize you completely missed the point. If this list convinced you to replay something, hit subscribe.